have this image in our heads of Corinth, right? We think of this, this pristine, marble-columned Greek city. The vibe is, philosophers in togas strolling through the agora, debating the soul. There's this sense of ancient, stable dignity.
Right, Athens, basically. We picture Athens.
Exactly. But looking at the sources we've got in front of us today, that image isn't just a little bit off. It's a complete hallucination.
It really is. The Corinth that the Apostle Paul visited was actually the nouveau riche capital of the ancient world.
Nouveau riche. So that's a perfect description.
It was a city of former slaves, of veterans, of social climbers, all just scrambling to buy honor and status.
If you walk into 1 Corinthians thinking about Socrates and Plato, you're going to misread the whole letter from the first verse.
You are. I mean, Anthony Thiselton says the mood in Corinth was, and this is his word, strikingly postmodern.
Wow. In the first century. What does he mean by that?
Well, it was a culture of pragmatism, of pluralism, of relentless self-promotion. It was a place where objective truth mattered a lot less than impact or, success.
It's about what works, what gets you ahead.
Exactly. It was all about the brand, your personal brand.
Which changes absolutely everything about how we read this letter. I mean, this realization is the key that unlocks the whole book.
It is.
Paul isn't writing to a stable, traditional society with deep roots. He's writing to a boomtown, a loud, flashy boomtown obsessed with status, where the church was in very real danger of becoming just another social club.
Just another rung on the social ladder.
Welcome, everyone, to Theology Brain, chapter by chapter.
Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Before we can really dig into chapter 1, verse by verse, in our next deep dive, we have to understand the matrix of this letter.
The soil.
The soil, the air they were breathing. We need to understand the dirt these people were walking on because it explains so much of the conflict.
Right. And our goal here, as always, is biblical depth without the academic headache. But we aren't going to skip the nuance. We're focusing on the historical context, the exegetical details, and of course the pastoral reality that flows out of it.
So when Paul sits down to write this, what's the mission? What's the fire in his belly?
I think his mission, the big headline, is to reclaim a church that is rapidly, and I mean rapidly, assimilating into its culture.
Yes, that's the perfect word. Assimilating. They aren't suffering from persecution, not like the church in Thessalonica.
No, not at all.
The Corinthians are suffering from arrogance.
That's it.
They're comfortable. They're probably fairly wealthy, some of them, and they're just drifting. Paul is writing to save the gospel itself from being twisted into a kind of Hellenistic wisdom cult.
A self-help program for the upwardly mobile.
Pretty close, yeah.
And to guide us through this, we have three what I'd call heavy hitters in our source stack today. We're looking at David Garland's commentary in the BECNT series.
An incredible resource on the social world.
Gordon Fee from the NICNT.
A theological powerhouse.
And Anthony Thiselton from the NIGTC.
The philosopher theologian.
So why this specific triad? Why these three?
Well, because they cover all the bases so perfectly. Garland, as you said, is a master of social history. He explains the why behind the strange behavior based on Roman customs, patronage, all of it.
He gives you the sociology.
He does. Then you have Fee, who is just a brilliant theological exegete. He's also Pentecostal, which I think is significant here because he's incredibly attuned to the language of the Spirit, the pneuma, and the spiritual counterfeit that was cropping up in Corinth.
And Thiselton.
Thiselton is the philosopher. His commentary is, I'll be honest, it's dense. It's not a light read.
No, it's a commitment.
It is. But he connects the ancient rhetorical strategies to modern hermeneutics, to how we read and interpret better than anyone. He's the one who really draws that line from Corinth to our own postmodern moment.
So we have the sociologist, the theologian, and the philosopher. It's a great combination.
It is. And it's important to remember what kind of letter this is. Garland calls it an occasional letter.
Ad hoc.
Exactly. It's not a systematic theology treatise like Romans, where Paul is laying out his thought from A to Z. Here, he's putting out fires.
Lots of fires.
He's responding to specific things. First, there are oral reports he's heard from Chloe's people. We don't know who they were, but they came with a concerning report card.
Factions, divisions, lawsuits.
All of it. And then he's also responding to a letter the Corinthians themselves sent him where they asked a bunch of questions.
About marriage, about idol food.
Right. And you can almost hear their smugness in the questions. So Paul is juggling both. He's correcting the bad reports and answering their questions.
And we also have to remember, this isn't even the first letter he sent them.
No, it's not. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. In chapter 5, verse 9, he says, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people.
The previous letter, the one that's lost to history.
The lost letter? So we are, in a very real sense, jumping into the middle of a very tense, ongoing conversation. They've already ignored or misunderstood him once.
Which raises the stakes for this letter considerably.
Immensely.
Okay, so let's get into the dirt. Let's start with our first segment, the tale of two cities. Garland is so insistent that we have to distinguish between Old Corinth and New Corinth. I think most readers, myself included, sometimes just gloss over that. Corinth is Corinth. Why is he so adamant about this distinction?
Because it's probably the single most important historical fact for understanding the letter. There is a 100-year gap where the city of Corinth literally did not exist.
Just gone.
Gone. The old Greek Corinth, the city of legend, the one that rivaled Athens and Sparta, was utterly destroyed by the Roman general Lucius Mummius in 146 BC.
And destroyed is putting it mildly, from what Garland says.
Oh, it's an understatement. Mummius made an example of it. He killed the men, he sold the women and children into slavery, and then he burned the city to the ground. The Romans even performed a rite, a formal curse, forbidding anyone from ever rebuilding on that site.
Wow, so this was a deliberate theological act of erasure.
Absolutely. It was a message to the rest of Greece: do not mess with Rome. And for a century, it was nothing but ruins, a ghost town. Garland mentions that wealthy Roman tourists would actually visit the site, to see the wreckage of this once great Greek city.
Kind of disaster tourism.
Exactly. But then, in 44 BC, 100 years later, everything changes. Julius Caesar refounds the city. He establishes it as Colonia Laus Iulia Corinthiensis.
A Roman colony with his family name right in the title.
Precisely. And this is the critical piece of data you have to hold on to. Geographically, Paul is in Greece, in the province of Achaia, but culturally, politically, and legally, he's in Rome.
A little slice of Rome on Greek soil.
That's it. The laws were Roman. The court system was Roman. The architecture was Roman. The language of business and government was Latin, even if the people on the street spoke Greek.
Garland really argues that if you try to interpret the Corinthians' behavior through a purely Greek lens, like they're students of Plato, you'll just miss the mark every time.
You will. You have to see it through a Roman lens of honor, shame, patronage, and ambition.
Okay, and the location of this new Roman city, I was looking at the maps and Fee's commentary. I mean, you couldn't pick a better spot for a commercial hub. It's the definition of strategic.
It's a gold mine. It's what the ancient geographer Strabo called the master of two harbors.
Lycaeum and Century.
Right. You have Lycaeum on the Corinthian Gulf, which faces west toward Italy and Rome. And then you have Cenchreae on the Saronic Gulf, facing east toward Asia Minor, Ephesus, the whole Aegean world.
And connecting them is this narrow little strip of land, the isthmus.
Which is only about 4 miles wide at its narrowest point. And this is where you get the Diolkos.
The Diolkos, let's talk about that. It's basically a rock-cut trackway.
Yeah, it's a paved limestone trackway that ran across the isthmus. It was an engineering marvel for its time.
So if you're a ship captain back then, you have a choice.
You do. A terrible choice, actually. You can sail all the way around the Peloponnese, the southern peninsula of Greece. But to do that, you have to navigate Cape Malea.
And that was bad.
That was terrifying. The winds there are notoriously treacherous and unpredictable. Strabo quotes an old sailor's proverb, "When you double Malay, forget your home." It meant your chances of making it back were slim.
So the choice is risk death and shipwreck at sea or pay the toll at Corinth.
Exactly. And almost everyone chose to pay the toll. You dock at one of the harbors. If your ship was small enough, they had these contraptions, basically wheeled platforms, and they would haul the entire vessel hull, mass everything across the 4 miles of the Diolkos using teams of oxen and slaves.
That's incredible.
And if it was a large merchant vessel, one of the big grain ships, you would unload all your cargo. It would be carted across the isthmus and then reloaded onto a different ship waiting in the other harbor.
And every single step of that process, money is changing hands.
Massive amounts of money. You've got tolls, transport fees, docking fees, taxes on the goods. Then you've got lodging for the sailors who might be stuck there for days or weeks.
Food, drink, entertainment.
All of it. This is why Fee calls Corinth the New York, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas of the ancient world, all rolled into one.
It's a perfect storm. It was a melting pot of commerce, different cultures, different religions, and vice.
And instant liquid cash. This wasn't old landed gentry money. This was fast money. The church was born in a center of radical movement, transience, and new wealth.
Okay, that brings us to the people themselves, who actually lived there. If Caesar refounded the city, he obviously didn't send the Roman senators and the aristocracy, did he?
No, quite the opposite. He sent the people Rome wanted to get rid of. It was a social release valve. Both Garland and Fee emphasized that the population was largely composed of freedmen.
Freedmen. We need to pause on that term because I think for us it might sound like ex-convict or something, but it's a very specific Roman social class, isn't it?
It is a very specific and very complicated social status. A libertinus, a freedman, was someone who had been a slave but had been manumitted or legally freed by their master.
So they were free, but there was a catch.
A huge catch. They carried a social stigma for the rest of their lives. They were not freeborn. They had no respectable family history, no genealogy. And you have to understand, in the ancient world, your status was almost entirely determined by your birth. Who was your father? Who was your grandfather? That was the most important question.
And these people had no answer to that question, or an answer they'd rather not give.
Exactly. Their past was one of servitude. So you have an entire city populated by people with no past, but with a desperate hunger for a future.
Which creates a very specific psychological environment.
It does. It creates the culture of the social climber because there was no old, entrenched aristocracy in New Corinth to look down their noses at you and keep you in your place. You could actually buy your way up the social ladder.
Money talked louder than bloodlines.
Much louder. Garland notes that the entire society was hyper-competitive, fiercely individualistic, and absolutely obsessed with what he calls status markers.
Things that prove you've made it.
Right. Your house, the clothes you wear, the dinner parties you throw, the important people you know. It was all about public display.
Thiselton brings in a really fascinating sociological concept here that I think just unlocks so much of the letter. He talks about status inconsistency, borrowing the term from the sociologist Wayne Meeks. Break that down for us. What does status inconsistency look like on the ground in Corinth?
It's when your different social variables just don't line up. So in a stable, traditional society, if you have high status, you usually have wealth, education, and family pedigree. It all matches.
It's a consistent package.
Right. But in a boomtown like Corinth, it was all scrambled. You might have a guy who is fantastically wealthy from the shipping trade, but everyone knows he's a former slave, and maybe he still has a rough accent. So high wealth, but low social prestige.
Or the reverse.
Or the reverse. You could have someone from a technically freeborn but poor family who has a high-class rhetorical education, but he's broke. So high cultural capital, low economic capital.
And that mismatch creates a deep, gnawing anxiety.
A profound anxiety. You are constantly trying to fix your status. You're trying to compensate for what you lack. You have to boast. You have to show off.
If you're the rich ex-slave, you throw lavish dinner parties and maybe you try to buy a political office to gain honor.
Precisely. And if you're the poor but educated guy, you show off your rhetorical skills, your Sophia, your wisdom, to prove you're intellectually superior to the rich guy.
And this spills directly into the church.
It floods into the church.
This explains the factions in chapter 1 perfectly. I follow Paul. I follow Apollos. I follow Cephas. It's not just a simple theological preference, is it?
No, not at all. It's the Roman system of patronage playing out in the church. It's name-dropping. It's about attaching yourself to a powerful figure, a big man, to boost your own status.
I'm with Apollos, the eloquent one. That makes me sophisticated.
I'm with Cephas, who was with Jesus himself. That gives me original source credibility. It's treating the apostles like they are the founders of competing philosophical schools. They were turning the church into another arena for their status games.
Which ties back into the Roman nature of the problem again. Garland talks about the schmoozing culture. The Latin term is ambitio, right? Where we get our word ambition.
Yes, ambitio. And it literally meant the act of walking around canvassing for votes or support. Roman society ran on what was called clientela, the patronage system.
You needed a patron.
You absolutely needed a patron, a wealthy, powerful person who would protect you, give you legal help, maybe lend you money. And in exchange, you, the client, would give them your loyalty, your vote, and public praise. You'd show up at their house every morning just to be seen with them.
It was a system of mutual obligation.
It was. And it was all about honor and public perception.
And here comes Paul into this world.
And here comes Paul, the tent maker, who not only has a low-status manual labor job, which was socially humiliating for a public intellectual or philosopher.
Right. Wise men didn't work with their hands.
No. But he refuses to accept their patronage. He won't take their money.
Which we, in our modern world, we read that and we think, oh, how noble of Paul. He doesn't want to be a burden on anyone.
That's exactly how we read it, and there's truth to that. But Garland points out that to the Corinthians, this was a social slap in the face.
How so?
By refusing their financial support, Paul was refusing to enter into that social bond of patronage. He was refusing to play their social game. It would have been seen as a profound insult.
Like he's saying, I don't need you. Your support is worthless to me.
Precisely. Who does this guy think he is? He's too good for my money. It would have been perceived as arrogance on his part, and it created a huge barrier and a source of conflict. They couldn't understand him.
Okay, so that sets the social stage. Now let's pivot to the nature of the opposition itself. We've established the setting, this swirl of new money, status anxiety, Roman striving. But what about the specific theological fight within the church? You asked earlier if the church was just fighting amongst themselves. But Gordon Fee, in particular, argues it's something bigger than that.
Yeah, Fee offers a reconstruction of the situation that is, I think, really compelling and changes how you read the whole letter. He argues the conflict isn't just internal parties squabbling with each other, party A versus party B. He argues the primary conflict is the church versus Paul.
The whole church is against him.
Well, maybe not every single person, but a significant, influential portion of the church leadership and the congregation. Fee's argument is that the church has fundamentally moved toward an anti-Pauline theology. They are actively judging him and his message.
And what are the grounds for their judgment?
They view themselves as pneumatikos, a key word in the letter. It means spiritual people. They believe that through the Spirit, they have arrived at true Sophia, or wisdom.
A higher spiritual knowledge.
Higher knowledge. And then they look at Paul. They look at his physical presence, which he himself says was unimpressive. They listen to his speech, which wasn't the polished, high-flown rhetoric they admired. They see him working a menial job. And they conclude, this man is not truly spiritual. He doesn't have the wisdom.
They think they've outgrown him.
In their minds, yes. They've graduated. They see his message, especially his constant focus on the cross, as basic as spiritual milk. And they believe they have moved on to solid food, to a higher, more philosophical, more impressive spirituality.
This connects directly to what both Fee and Thiselton call over-realized eschatology.
It's the engine driving almost all their errors.
Okay, we need to unpack that phrase, because it sounds like a final exam question from a seminary class. Over-realized eschatology. What does that mean in plain English?
It's a vital concept for this letter. Eschatology is just the study of the eschaton, the end times, the future hope of our faith.
The resurrection, the new heavens and new earth.
All of that. Now, the classic Christian view of our present age is one of tension. It's often described as already not yet.
Okay.
Through the death and resurrection of Jesus, the kingdom of God has broken into the world. We are forgiven, we have the Spirit, we are new creations. That's the already. But the final consummation hasn't happened yet. The final resurrection of the body is still future. We still live in a fallen world. We still suffer. We still get sick. We still die. We still struggle with sin. That's the not yet.
So we live in the overlap of the ages.
Perfectly put. We live in that tension. But the Corinthians, they had a problem with the not yet. They were so focused on the spiritual blessings they had now, they essentially erased the not yet. They believed they had already fully arrived.
So they thought they were already living the full resurrection life.
Spiritually, yes. They believed they were already reigning with Christ. Paul actually mocks this idea in chapter 4 when he says, already you have become kings. It's dripping with sarcasm. They thought they were already living this angelic, purely spiritual existence.
So if I believe I'm already a spiritual king, ruling in the heavenlies, then what I do with my physical body down here on earth
doesn't really matter. And you see, this single theological error fueled two opposite but related practical problems in the church.
On the one hand,
it led to libertinism, a kind of spiritual elitism. The argument went, my spirit is saved and is already reigning with Christ. My body is just a physical shell that's going to die and decay anyway. So it doesn't matter if I sleep with a prostitute, chapter 6, or if I go to a pagan temple and eat food sacrificed to an idol, chapter 8. It can't touch the real me, my spirit.
a total disconnect between body and spirit.
A radical Gnostic-like dualism. And the other extreme,
Asceticism.
Exactly. On the other hand, it led to a harsh asceticism. The logic was, I am already living the resurrected life, and the Bible says in the resurrection there is no marriage. We will be like the angels. Therefore, I should not have sex with my spouse at all, chapter 7.
So both indulging the body and denying the body came from the same root error.
The very same root error. Thinking they had escaped the conditions and constraints of this present fallen age, they thought they were beyond the struggle.
And this makes Paul's task just incredibly difficult, because he has to reassert his apostolic authority, but not because he's on some ego trip.
No, not at all. He's doing it to save the gospel itself from being corrupted.
If he lets them continue down this path, the Christian faith in Corinth becomes just another Hellenistic wisdom cult.
That's the danger. It becomes about secret knowledge, rhetorical skill, and personal self-actualization. And the cross, the central symbol of weakness and foolishness to the world, gets pushed to the side in favor of a wisdom that looks a lot like the wisdom of the world they came from.
Okay, let's take a step back for a moment and compare our three guides. We've been weaving their insights together, but I want to explicitly contrast their approaches. If you're listening and trying to decide which commentary to buy, or just trying to get a handle on their unique angles, how do they differ? Let's start with David Garland.
David Garland, in the BECNT series, is the sociologist. If you want to understand the nuts and bolts of first-century Roman social relations, he is your guy.
He's all about the context.
All about it. He explains why the rich were eating before the poor at the Lord's Supper, how the patronage system created the factions, why filing a lawsuit in a Roman court was a public status game. For Garland, a lot of the bad theology in Corinth was actually just sociology becoming theology.
What do you mean by that?
He argues the church was simply acting like any other secular club or association in Corinth because that was the only social model they knew. They were importing the world's competitive ethos directly into the church without even realizing it. He's less convinced there was a single, unified, false theology they all subscribed to.
He sees it more as a collection of bad behaviors driven by their culture.
Exactly. More sociological than theological at its root.
Okay, and what about Gordon Fee?
Gordon Fee, in the NICNT, is the theologian and, I would say, the fighter. His reading is much more adversarial. He sees the letter as a combat zone.
It's Paul versus the Corinthians.
It is. A direct confrontation between Paul's gospel of the cross and a specific, unified, arrogant spirituality that has taken hold in Corinth. He is the strongest proponent of that over-realized eschatology framework we just talked about.
So for him, it's not just bad behavior, it's heresy.
It's a fundamental theological deviation. He emphasizes the conflict between the true work of the Spirit, the pneuma, and their counterfeit human wisdom, Sophia. His commentary is passionate, it's forceful, and it's deeply theological.
And that leaves Anthony Thiselton.
Thiselton, in the NIGTC, is the philosopher. His commentary is massive, and it's because he's engaging not just with the text, but with the entire history of interpretation and philosophy.
Hermeneutics.
Hermeneutics is the key word for Thiselton, how we interpret texts, how language functions. He's the one who brilliantly connects the Corinthian mindset to postmodernism.
That idea of consumerism, of self-promotion, the social construction of reality.
All of it. He argues the Corinthians viewed truth as something you could package and sell, and the best speaker was the one with the best product. He focuses heavily on Paul's rhetorical strategy, how Paul uses and subverts their own expectations about what a wise speaker should sound like.
So to summarize, Garland sees them as worldly social climbers. Fee sees them as arrogant spiritualists engaged in theological error, and Thiselton sees them as pragmatic, postmodern consumers of religion.
And the scary part is they are all correct. It's a perfect storm of cultural pressure, theological error, and philosophical confusion.
It really is, which I think leads us to the big idea. If we have to boil down all this context, the boomtown setting, the status anxiety, the Roman pride, the false spirituality, what is the single central controlling idea of 1 Corinthians?
I think we can land on this together. The central theological idea of this letter is that the gospel of the crucified Messiah must be the sole criterion, the only measuring stick for judging all Christian behavior, belief, and community life.
The cross shatters the world's measuring stick.
It completely pulverizes it. You cannot, Paul argues, hold to the cross, which is a symbol of shame, weakness, foolishness, and self-sacrifice, and simultaneously be obsessed with status, power, rhetoric, and self-promotion. The two are mutually exclusive.
The cross isn't just the thing that saves you, it's the pattern for how you live.
Yes. That's the move Paul makes over and over. He forces every single practical issue in the letter. Factions, sex, lawsuits, marriage, idol food, worship, spiritual gifts. He pushes all of it through the filter of the cross. And if it doesn't align with the cross, it has to go.
Which brings us to the application bridge.
Yeah.
We don't live in a Roman colony in 55 AD. But this boomtown mentality, this obsession with status, it feels deeply uncomfortably modern.
It's us. We absolutely live in a culture of status inconsistency. Just look at social media. What is Instagram or LinkedIn if not a massive global engine for curating an image of success?
We're all managing our personal brand.
All the time. We're constantly trying to project an image of being wealthier, happier, more successful, more wise than we actually are. The anxiety is the same.
And we bring that exact same mindset into the church. Unchanged.
We do. We value giftedness over character. We are drawn to the big man leader, the one with the charisma, the one who can speak well and draw a crowd.
The successful pastor.
The successful pastor, the one with the big numbers, the big budget, the best-selling book. And we tend to ignore the fact that he might be arrogant or narcissistic or unteachable. That is the Corinthian error in a nutshell. We judge by the world's metrics of power and success, not by the cross's metric of humility and service.
Thiselton's point about postmodernism really hits hard here. The idea that we live in a world where truth is often secondary to impact or effectiveness.
Right. The questions that dominate are, does it work? Does it grow the church? Does it sell? Paul forces us to ask a different question. Is it faithful to the cross?
He also challenges our source of self-worth.
He does. He asks, does your identity, your sense of value, come from who you know and what you achieve? From your network, your resume, your accomplishments? Or does it come from a much more profound reality? He uses this stunning phrase in chapter 8. The Corinthians were proud of what they knew. But Paul says the ultimate status is not to know, but to be known by God.
To have your identity given to you by him, rather than building it for yourself.
That's everything. That's the whole game.
And what about Garland's point about comfort? The fact that the Corinthian church wasn't being persecuted, it was comfortable. It was, in many ways, successful.
And because they were comfortable, they began to compromise. They wanted to fit in at the sophisticated dinner parties. They didn't want to be the social weirdos who had all these strange moral scruples. They wanted the best of both worlds.
And Garland's warning is that comfort can be more spiritually dangerous than persecution.
Much more dangerous. It's the question we have to ask ourselves. Are we so at ease in our culture, so comfortable, that we've lost our Christian distinctiveness? Have we blended in so well that we're no longer salt and light? That's the danger of the boomtown church.
It leaves us then with a really haunting final question to sit with.
It does. If the Apostle Paul visited your church this Sunday, if he walked into the lobby, looked at the welcome banners, listened to the announcements and the sermon, what would he see?
Would he see a countercultural community fundamentally shaped and defined by the weakness and foolishness of the cross?
Or would he see a mirror image of the city outside the doors? The same values, the same status games, the same success metrics, just with a little religious language sprinkled on top and maybe better music.
That is the question to sit with this week.
It is.
Next time, we move from the background to the battlefield. We're diving headfirst into chapter 1, where Paul takes on their obsession with the wisdom of the world and drops the hammer, calling the message of the cross foolishness to the Greeks and a stumbling block to the Jews.
It is one of the most powerful, world-altering chapters in the entire New Testament. He just dismantles their entire worldview in about 20 verses. It's breathtaking.
I can't wait. We will see you in the text.
See you then.